Welcome to tutorialsinhand.com. In this video tutorial, we are going to learn about classical waterfall model. In the previous video tutorial, we have learned about what is SDLC and different things about SDLC. Now we are going to start with this classical waterfall model. The diagrammatic representation is shown over here on the right side of the screen. So first let's understand basic things about this classical waterfall model. So if we go about the pointer, then classical waterfall model was introduced by Winston W. Royce in 1970. Now the second pointer is that classical waterfall model is a basic SDLC model and it is linear and sequential model, you can say, because it follows this linear approach. One by one, step by one step, it moves from feasibility study to maintenance phase, right? And the diagrammatic representation that you see over here, what we see that it resembles the cascade of waterfall. From there it get its name classical waterfall model, right? So this is from where it get its name classical waterfall model, and it is linear and sequential, means the stages goes in a sequential manner from feasibility study to requirement analysis, specification, design, then coding and unit testing, then integration and system testing, and then finally it goes to maintenance. So this is why it is linear and sequential, right? And classical waterfall model is generally used for the projects where requirement, means what we need to make as a software product, is well defined. That means requirement is very clear from the customer side. The client who has given you the project to make this software product is very clear. So requirement is clear, and as a result the goal is also very clear to the development team, right? So the goal and requirement is very clear, and at the same time this model assumes that there is no scope of error. So there is no scope of error during any of the phases. That means every phase that is being performed in this classical waterfall model should be very accurate and perfect, and it should not have any scope of the error. The reason behind that is we do not have the facility to come back to the previous stage and correct the error. Once one stage is completed, it is assumed that everything is very clear and 100% error proof, and that is why once one stage is completed, then only we move to the next stage. What I mean to say is, when we consider this feasibility study, then in feasibility study, if everything is done perfectly, that means we have completed 100% of the feasibility study and have confidence that each and everything is perfectly fine, then only we will move to the next stage, that is requirement analysis and specification phase. And the same is the case for this requirement analysis and specification phase. Once it is clear that this phase is also 100% done, then only we will move to the design phase, and similarly it is for each and every phases. So once the previous stage is assumed or found out to be 100% perfect, then only we move to the next stage, and that is why we do not have any scope of error in the previous phase, because we will not be able to return to any of the previous phase. Suppose if we want to return, there is any problem in feasibility study or there is any problem in requirement analysis specification, and we are at the design phase and we want to go back and correct the error, so that is not possible in classical waterfall model. We cannot move back to the previous stage. So in this model, so we cannot move backward to previous stages in order to correct the error committed in those stages. That means if you are in the coding and unit testing phase, or you are in the design phase, and there is an error in the previous phase to which you stand currently, you cannot move back and correct that. And that is why this model is very ideal. That means it assumes that once a phase is complete, everything is very perfect and there is no scope of error correction from the previous phase, right? And at the same time, This is classical waterfall model because we have already told that it resembles the flow of water from the staircase or from the waterfall. If you drop a water from the top of the staircase, how it falls? It will fall step by step, right, to the lowest stair, and that is why this also happens to be same. Once feasibility study is done, then we come to requirement analysis and specification phase. Once this requirement analysis and specification is done, we come to design phase. Once design phase is done, we come to coding and unit testing phase. Once coding and unit testing is done, then we come to integration and system testing, and finally we come to the maintenance phase, right? Now if we talk about each step one by one, that means if we talk about this feasibility study first, so what this feasibility study means? So this is the first step, right? Feasibility study. During feasibility study, what is done? During feasibility study, we check two things. What? Whether the product that we are going to make, that is software product that we are going to make, is financially feasible and whether it is technically feasible or not. That means we have to identify two things. When the software is going to be made, we need to find out whether the technical things, technical aspects, that means technical tools, third party services if you are going to use any to make this product, and any other thing, means any other technical aspect like resources that you want. Resources means in the terms of manpower and any other resources, that means technical resources you want to find, so those are available or not in the market. So there are various aspects that is related to this technical feasibility is checked, and if it is found to be okay, that means if it is technically found to be okay, then we also try to find out whether it is financially feasible or not. That means the company, the budget that has been provided by the company who is requesting this software is available or not. That means budget is available or not to create this software, and when both of these are found to be okay, then we say that okay, this feasibility study phase is okay, and we say that okay, this is 100% correct. And during this feasibility study phase, we also try to find out, means very high level, that what are the inputs that would be required to the software, how the processing would be done, and what would be the output. So a very rough kind of thing on the high level. Make sure that we stand in a very sound position financially and technically to go ahead to the next stage. So once this first stage is completed, we now move ahead to the requirement analysis and specification phase. That means we are 100% sure that this feasibility study phase is completed. Now we move ahead to requirement analysis and specification phase. So as the name suggests, this requirement analysis and specification phase has two parts. What the two parts are? The first one is going to be the requirement gathering and analysis. The first one is going to be requirement gathering and analysis. So the first one is going to be requirement gathering and analysis, and the second one is going to be the requirement specification. So this requirement analysis and specification is broken into two parts and is carried out into two parts. That is, first one is requirement gathering and analysis, and the second one is requirement specification. So in requirement gathering and analysis, first the requirement is gathered from the customer. Requirement is gathered from the customer. So requirement is gathered from the customer about the software product that they are trying to achieve, and once that is gathered and is talked about from different angles, then what happens is analysis of the gathered requirement starts. And during the analysis, what we try to do, we try to remove any incompleteness or inconsistency or redundancy. So during analysis, what we do is, once the requirement is gathered from the customer about the product and every angle is talked about and everything is clearly understood, then what is done? Then we try to remove any inconsistency, anomaly, and incompleteness. So during requirement gathering and analysis phase, everything is clearly understood about the product. All the talks happens between customer and the development team or the management team, and after everything is talked about, then finally during the requirement analysis they try to remove any inconsistency, any confusion, any anomalies and any incompleteness, and finally once this phase is completed, then we come ahead to this requirement specification phase, where the final documentation of what has been gathered so far and all the discussions that has happened between the client and the management or the development team is documented. So in this specification phase, everything that has been discussed over here, everything that we have found out over here, every inconsistency, incompleteness that we have removed, we document it in the form of SRS document. SRS document means software requirement specification document, which is actually considered as a contract. This SRS document is considered as a contract between client and the development firm. Means what we want, how we want, and what would be the final end product, how it should feel and how it should behave. Everything is written in this SRS document, and it is signed by both the development firm and the client. And then once this is done, we get, means on the document we get the final product. So everything that is written in the SRS document has to be converted to the software product finally. And once this SRS document is prepared, then we move ahead to the design phase. Now during design phase, what happens is, during design phase, the SRS document that we prepared in the previous phase, this SRS document that we prepared in the previous phase goes through a series of design process to be converted into what? In the form of design document. So SRS document is finally used to produce what? Design document. So this is what happens during the design phase, but it is not that simple. Means in the diagram, when you see this design process, there are lot of steps that happens during this design process. So what happens is, so during this design process, again we have two different processes. One is preliminary or high level design, and the next one is detailed design phase. So these are two different phases in which this complete design process is done. Detailed design phase. In the first preliminary or high level design, what is generally produced is, we create a program structure or software architecture. In this preliminary or high level design, we achieve what? Program structure or software architecture. And during the detailed design phase, what we get? During the detailed design phase, we get module specification. So in detailed design phase, we get module specification. That means what happens is, each and every module that we are going to develop for the software product is clearly defined over here. That means suppose you are creating a calculator, then in the calculator phase, what happens is the addition module, subtraction module, multiplication module and different modules are clearly specified. Means what would be the input, how the processing would be done, and what is the output, and how the output should be displayed on the UI or any other means interface where this is going to be displayed. All thing is written over here and mentioned over here in this module specification phase, which the developers who will be coding the module have to adhere to, right? So this is where detailed design phase we get the module specification. And during this preliminary stage, we get to draw different diagrams like structure chart, UML or DFDs. So here we also get what? Different kind of diagrams. Diagrams like what? Structure chart, UML diagrams, different kind of diagrams. What we get during design, we draw a structure chart, UML, DFT. UML means unified modeling language, DFT means data flow diagram, and different kind of diagrams we draw to come up to the conclusion and completely finish the design phase. And once these activities are completed, we go ahead to the coding and unit testing phase. Now during coding and unit testing phase, all the things that is written in the design document is finally coded. Means we start to code the programming language that has been chosen. We start to write the code for agreed module in agreed programming language. And once you have completed the development of your module, what you will do, you will unit test your code. Now unit test your code means you will test only your module. Suppose you are working on the addition module of the calculator, so you will unit test that whether the input that you are giving is producing the exact output or not, right? So once you find out that okay, I am getting the desired result when my module is called with the means test parameters, then you are 100% sure that okay, my unit testing is working fine, and then you will go ahead to integration testing. Once this is done, what will happen is integration testing will also come up, right? So once integration testing is carried out, what happens is this addition module will be integrated to different other modules like multiplication module which someone else has developed. This is another module. So this multiply module will be integrated and then both will be tested together whether they are working fine or not. Means when addition is called, it is performing only the addition, it is not performing multiplication or some other task. And when multiplication is called, then multiplication is performing equally well. And similarly all other modules will be integrated together one by one or all together and will be checked whether it is working perfectly or not. And once it is working perfectly, that means your unit testing plus integration testing is finally completed. And once all the integration testing is completed, then you finally move ahead to the system testing. That means when this unit testing, integration testing both is completed, then we move ahead to where? And the goal of system testing is to confirm that the system is behaving exactly as it is documented in the SRS document. So system testing confirms that the module developed is or system developed is performing as per the SRS document, and thus we have got the exact product that we required. Now the system testing is performed in three phases. One is alpha testing, other is beta testing, and then acceptance testing. How it is performed? Alpha testing is performed by the development team themselves. And once they are satisfied that all the functionalities are working fine, then they call a friendly set of customers who has not developed the product and has no idea about the product, how it is developed, but they are well aware and they know how it should behave. We call friendly set of customers. That friendly set of customers may be the developers of any other application in the same company, some other random people who has the knowledge about this, and they will test your application to see whether all the functionality are performing as per expectation or not. And then these friendly set of customers approve it, and when it is approved by them, then acceptance testing starts. And in acceptance testing, who tests? In this acceptance testing, customer will test themselves. Means the customer who has requested you to develop this product, they will test themselves and find out whether your developed application is working as per their expectation. And here they have the option to accept your software product or to reject it. So this is how system testing is performed in the SDLC waterfall model. And once the customer accepts your software product, that is handed over to them. Then the maintenance phase start. Now the maintenance phase also has three parts. The maintenance phase is performed in three parts. The first one is corrective maintenance, another one is perfective maintenance, and the third one is adaptive maintenance. Corrective maintenance involve correcting the errors. So corrective maintenance involve correcting the errors not discovered during the development phase, or anything that has been overlooked or missed, or due to communication gap there has been some error in the product. So we try to correct that in the corrective maintenance phase. In perfective maintenance, what we do? In perfective maintenance, we improve the implementations of the system. That means we enhance the functionality of the system according to the customer's requirement. For example, we developed addition, subtraction and multiplication module, right? But now the customer wants the division module to be included as well, and they come up with this suggestion that we need division also. So this module will be enhanced, right, and will be added to this particular all three modules, and this will come in perfective maintenance. Or say suppose addition, subtraction or anything was happening only for two numbers. Now they want you to enhance it to accept 3 or 4 numbers. So you should accept that and try to implement that, and let your modules, that is addition, subtraction, module, multiplication, division, accept 3 or 4 parameters as well, and they should perform addition on these 3 or 4 numbers as per the customer's requirement. And then we have adaptive maintenance. What happens in adaptive maintenance is, so adaptive maintenance is generally done for the kind of activities like to port the system to work in other environments. Those things will be taken care by the adaptive maintenance, right? For example, porting may be required to get software to work on a new computer platform or new operating system. So in that case, adaptive maintenance will come into play. So this is how maintenance is done in three phases, that is corrective, perfective and adaptive. Hope you have understood how maintenance works. And you should also note that this maintenance requires around 60% of the total effort that is needed in the entire phase. So this is the phase which requires the maximum effort, that is maintenance requires the maximum effort, right? So you should remember that it can come in the MCQ form, that which phase requires the maximum effort, and it should be the maintenance phase, right? So now let's move ahead to see what are the advantages and drawbacks of this waterfall model. Now here we have listed the advantages of classical waterfall model, and classical waterfall model is well suited for projects where requirement is clear and well defined, which we have also informed earlier as well. You see, requirement is well defined and the goal is very clear to the team, and it is suited for the project which does not involve frequent changes. That means once you have completed a requirement analysis specification phase and you are in the design phase, then the customer should not come up with new requirements that should be accommodated in the SRS document, and thus you should change each and every subsequent phase according to that. This is not at all possible. So once the project which has all the goals and everything, every requirement, every functionalities that is needed to it is very clear, then only we can go ahead with this classical waterfall model, and it will be well suited for it. And also this is well suited for projects which does not have a very rigid time constraint. You get a lot of time to perform one step very clearly and be 100% accurate that I have performed one step with perfection and now I am ready to move to the next stage, because we cannot come back and correct the error. So this is not at all possible, and this classical waterfall model becomes really important because it helps us to understand the other models very clearly. If you have understanding of this SDLC model stages, then you will be able to understand the other SDLC models like spiral model, prototyping model or any other model whichever you follow for your software development product. And this classical waterfall model also important because irrespective of which model you are following to develop your product, you have to write your final document in classical waterfall model resemblance. Why? Because it gives you a better comprehension, better understanding, and it gives you a better highlight of each and every functionalities, each and every contract that you have with the customer and what you are going to make. So this final document is written to resemble the classical waterfall model for better comprehensive, right? Irrespective of whichever model you follow for software development. So this is why it becomes really important. Now disadvantage of classical waterfall model is that there is no scope of rework. There is no scope of rework for errors committed during the previous phases. So you cannot move back to any previous phase and correct the error and then accommodate all the changes in the subsequent phases. That is not possible, which we already discussed earlier, right? So this is the disadvantage. Why? Because in today's world, you should have this scope where you can go back to the previous page and correct the error, because any engineer who is working on the project is not God, and they will definitely commit some error due to miscommunication, misunderstanding, or overlooking anything which needs to be corrected, right? So this is something which should be possible in the good SDLC model, which this does not provide because it was created somewhere around 1970. It is one of the oldest model and the basic model, right? So we will get other models which solve this problem where you can go back and correct the error of the previous phase. So this is one of the biggest disadvantage of the classical waterfall model. The other disadvantage is that this model assumes that everything is linear, right? Linear. This model assumes that everything is linear, and once phase gets completed, then only the other phase will start. That means once feasibility study phase is completed, then only requirement analysis and specification will start, and once this is completed, then only design will start. And now what happens is, due to this linear approach, we have a lot of wastage, right? We have lot of wastage of resource, time, and budget as well. Why? Because if you follow the linear approach, then what happens is, when requirement analysis and specification phase or feasibility study phase is in progress, these people who are involved with these particular steps, like the people who are involved in design, coding and unit testing, integration and system testing, or requirement analysis specification, would sit idle, because until and unless the feasibility study phase is completed, requirement analysis and specification people cannot start their work. And that is the case with design and other subsequent phases people also. They will be sitting idle and just extracting the money, that is, they will be charging their fees without doing any work, which will be a lot of wastage of resource for the development firm, right? So this is not at all an ideal solution to develop the software, where people or resources has to sit idle and waste time, right? And at the same time, this model assumes that all the requirements are correctly defined in the beginning. Now the third disadvantage is that this SDLC model requires that all the requirements are correctly defined in the beginning of the project, which is not the case always, because the client will come up with changes at any phase. The client can come up with the changes and it should be accommodated whenever it comes. So this is another disadvantage, because in today's world what happens, the client gives you a basic requirement, you start the work, and then they keep working on their part and then try to find out what are the other requirements, what are the other functionalities that they need. They will inform that to you and you have to accommodate that in your subsequent phases. So this is where this model fails and is not suitable for the dynamic projects, where the demands and the requirements are changing frequently, right? So these are the major disadvantages of the classical waterfall model. So we have studied about the classical waterfall model, each and every stages of classical waterfall model, its advantages and disadvantages. Now I hope that if this question comes in any exam, you will be able to write about the classical waterfall model in the very solid way, and you will get a good marks. So if you really found this video tutorial helpful to you, informative to you, please don't forget to like and subscribe our channels, which will help us to get motivated and create more such videos for you in the future. Thank you for being with us till the end.